Hello and welcome to the Pantalogical of Magic introduction video. So this is going to be a series on everything that I know about magic. Now, if you don't have a copy of my book, that's totally fine. I'm making these videos so you have another way to learn my teachings. But if you do have a copy, well, you'll be able to cross-reference the chapters of the book to these videos so you can get some visual learning. So if you're new here, hi, welcome, thank you for being here. You're safe to be here. And if you've been here for a while, well, I'm sorry for how long this has taken. So I wrote the Pantalogical because one, I don't really agree with the spiritual community, but two, I've got my own ideas and my audience picked up on that. They understood my ideas. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to create an entire thesis on magic, my 30-year grimoire. Now, in the beginning pages of the book, I talk a little bit about myself and why I am the way I am. But then I go into a concept called the all. Now, this is something that you will get to learn a lot about if you continue watching this series. The all is my understanding as to how magic came to be on this planet. And it's nothing spiritual, mystical, magical, or supernatural. Simply put, I have researched human beings for 15 years, us, you and me. I had some big questions, like why on earth did a caveman need spirituality? Why on earth did we start leaving symbols everywhere? It was through getting the answers to those questions that my entire concept of magic completely changed. I believe that we have heavily misinterpreted our ancestors, and that these spiritual or magical things that they apparently left behind were not in fact magical or spiritual, but in fact a very old and forgotten language, one that you can still read and listen to today. The very thing that gave them this ability to create magic still resides inside of you right now today. It's called consciousness. And you'll notice that as I go along this journey with you, I'm going to consistently ask you to use that brain. This book, these series, is not going to be your next Bible. It is not a spell working series. It's not going to be your next crystal dictionary. In fact, each chapter follows along when I conceptualized them in my own life at my own age. I needed chapter 1 to get to chapter 2 for me to conceptualize chapter 3 at this age. So you might find it a little bit weird if you were to just jump to a random video or jump to a random chapter in the book. I ask you to stop, to research, and to come up with your own ideas before you follow on to the next thing. And the reason for that is one of the biggest reasons I even created the book to begin with, was so then you guys have a safe place to come back to while you're exploring spirituality. I call it a bubble. We can get really lost inside the ideas, the concepts, the rules, the regulations of particular crafts, unable to escape. And I wanted the Pantalogical to be a bubble popper for anyone that is very lost, that feels hurt, that feels like their craft isn't giving them what it is that they want. They can come back here. They can come back to the all. The all will have them. The all reality and the people within it are right here waiting for you. We talk a lot about how resources came to be, because I think that's extremely important, and it's one of the biggest reasons that I wrote the book as well, was to reinterpret everything. So for example, in like the 70s and 80s, psychologists and scientists went to India and other parts of Asia to discover spirituality, and they came back to the hippie craze and westernized it all and sold it all. And that's where chakras and kundalini and rainbow body comes from. Like, the Buddha never even said the word chakra in the ancient yogic texts. There ain't no rainbow nothing, right? It's not even in the original stuff. Christian monks and priests that were told to write about foreigners were told to write in a way and believed that foreigners were demonic. So it's interesting that you see these accounts, like for example, they call the Irish ancient, tall, slender, mystical beings that lived on the water's edge, right? And this eventually makes way for the Fey lore that we see today. But if you were to look at a different account from the same era, from maybe a traveler from a sailor, they would say, well, the people live in houses on the beach lines, they knew how to fish well, and they were pale. That's not a monster, that's a human, right? So we have to really understand how certain things were interpreted. We have to understand what was going on in their era. The Scottish are a fantastic example as to how we can get influenced as humans. For example, when Rollo and his war band ended up in France, his people were wearing a Christian cross and a Thor's amulet to church for up to 200 years after conversion. Okay? They weren't getting rid of that. Hundreds of years later, we see in Scotland, we've got completely Christianized people, but with all of the culture still of the Old Norse. So you've got historic texts of people that are terrified of night creatures, that's Scandinavian, but would pray to God to help. It shows just how influenced we can be, and this is where folk magic and folk stories come from. These are families who never left behind certain traditions, who sung the same lullabies to their children that their parents sung to them. This was how knowledge was passed, and with the Pantalogical, I wanted to strip back everything. Zero influence, all the way back to the beginning, to when we first started speaking. I've used my own ancestors' crafts pretty much throughout the entire book, just to reference everything, but I ask that you go and do this for your own history, for your own ancestry, because that is what is important for your own culture and for your own craft. So I'll wrap it up here. I think I've covered what I need to. Follow along. Let's see if I can get your magic to work.